Hello everyone. As in previous part we studied practical uses of WCAG guidelines. Now, let us see in-depth study of WCAG guidelines. Information and user interface components must be presentable to users in ways they can perceive. Reference: www.w3.org/tr/WCAG21/number perceivable. The requirements for success criterion 1.1.1 are 1.1.1.a Alternative text, active images. All linked images must have descriptive alternative text, alt attribute value, title attribute value, ARIA label property or ARIA labeled by property, that serves the same purpose and presents the same information as the linked image. 1.1.1.b Alternative text, informative images. Images that convey content must have descriptive alternative text, alt attribute value, title attribute value, ARIA label property or ARIA labeled by property, that serves the same purpose and presents the same information as the image. 1.1.1.c Alternative text, complex images. Images that are too complex to be fully described in a short text alternative must have their purpose described using alt text. Equivalent text alternatives to complex images must be provided in context or on a separate page, linked and/or referenced via long desc or ARIA described by property. 1.1.1.d Alternative text, decorative images. Images that do not convey content, are decorative, or with content that is already conveyed in text must be given null alternative text, alt equals, ARIA role equals presentation or implemented as CSS backgrounds. 1.1.1.e Alternative text, CSS images. CSS images are either pure decoration or must have a text alternative that is programmatically associated. 1.1.1.f Alternative text, input type images. Input type image form fields must have a non-empty alt attribute value, title attribute value, ARIA label property or ARIA labeled by property. Form buttons must have a descriptive value. Form inputs must have associated text labels or, if labels cannot be used, must provide a descriptive title or ARIA label attribute. 1.1.1.g Alternative text, CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA tests must have descriptive text alternatives describing the purpose of the CAPTCHA, and alternate forms using different modalities must be provided to address the needs of people with different disabilities. 1.1.1.h Alternative text, audio or video. Text alternatives must be provided to identify the purpose of the video or audio content. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.1 Audio or video only, pre-recorded, are 1.2.1.a Text transcript, pre-recorded audio only. Pre-recorded audio web-based files such as MP3 files and audio podcasts must come with an adjacent or easily reachable descriptive text transcript. 1.2.1.b Text or audio description, pre-recorded video only, no dialogue. Pre-recorded video files that contain no dialogue must come with an adjacent or easily reachable text or audio description of what happens on the visual track. The requirements for success criterion SC 1.2.2 Captions, pre-recorded, are 1.2.2.a Captions, pre-recorded. Pre-recorded, web-based video files must come with text-based synchronized captions. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.3 Audio description or media alternative, pre-recorded, are 1.2.3.a Text or audio description, pre-recorded video with dialogue. Pre-recorded video files containing essential information that is only conveyed visually must come with an adjacent or easily reachable full text alternative describing the important visual details or an audio description track. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.4 Captions, live, are 1.2.4.a Captions, live. All live multimedia files that contain audio must come with text-based synchronized captions. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.5 audio description, pre-recorded, are 1.2.5.a audio descriptions, pre-recorded. All web-based video files containing essential information that is only conveyed visually must come with a synchronized soundtrack with audio description in which gaps in dialogue are used to convey essential information regarding the visual content. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.6 sign language, pre-recorded, are 1.2.6.a sign language interpreter. Sign language interpretation is provided for all pre-recorded audio content in synchronized media. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.7 extended audio description, pre-recorded, are 1.2.7.a extent audio description. Audio description that is added to an audio-visual presentation by pausing the video so that there is time to add additional description. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.8 media alternative, pre-recorded, are 1.2.8.a media alternative, text. Provide audio description or text transcript for videos with sound. The requirements for success criterion 1.2.9 audio only, live, are 1.2.9.a audio only, live. Audio only. A time-based presentation that contains only audio, no video and no interaction. The requirements for success criterion 1.3.1 info and relationships are 1.3.1.a semantics. Elements must be used according to their meaning, not because of the way they appear visually. 1.3.1.b data tables. Data cells must be explicitly associated with header cells for data tables, and descriptive table captions and summaries may be provided where appropriate. Simple data tables, complex data tables, header/ID scope, optional. 1.3.1.c data tables in detail. Labels must be programmatically associated with form input elements, using label, explicit or implicit, title, ARIA labeled by or ARIA label. 1.3.1.d programmatic labels. Labels must be programmatically associated with form input elements, using label, explicit or implicit, title, ARIA labeled by or ARIA label. 1.3.1.e group related form elements. For groups of related controls where the individual labels for each control do not provide a sufficient description, field set and legend, or ARIA, must be used to describe the relationship. 1.3.1.f headings. Headings must be marked up using real HTML heading elements, h1 h6 or div role equals heading ARIA level equals 1. 1.3.1.g lists. Lists must be marked up using real HTML list elements, ol, dl, or div role equals list and role equals list item. The requirements for success criterion 1.3.2 meaningful sequence are 1.3.2.a reading order. The reading and navigation order, determined by code order, must be logical and intuitive. While it is best practice to make reading order and visual order match identical, it is not a true failure unless meaning is really changed by the order. The requirements for success criterion 1.3.3 sensory characteristics are 1.3.3.a visual cues. Instructions provided to users must rely on more than just visual cues. 1.3.3.b sound cues. Instructions provided to users must rely on more than just sound or auditory cues. The requirements for success criterion 1.3.4 orientation are 1.3.4.a device orientation. Orientation of the content is not locked to either landscape or portrait, unless a specific orientation is essential for the functionality. The requirements for success criterion 1.3.5 identify input purpose are 1.3.5.a identify input purpose. The purpose for each common input field that collects an individual's personal data is programmatically defined based on the list of 53 input purposes for user interface components. Autocomplete attribute tokens that can be used to meet WCAG 2.1 SC 1.3.5 identify input purpose. The requirements for success criterion 1.3.6 identify purpose are 1.3.6.a Identify purpose, level AAA. In content implemented using markup languages, the purpose of user interface components, icons, and regions can be programmatically determined. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.1 Use of color are 1.4.1.a Color as information. Color must not be used as the sole method of conveying content or distinguishing visual elements. 1.4.1.b Link color contrast. Color alone must not be used to distinguish links from surrounding text unless the color contrast between the link and the surrounding text is at least 3:1 and an additional differentiation is provided when the link is hovered or receives focus. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.2 Audio control are 1.4.2.a Audio control. A mechanism must be provided to stop, pause, mute, or adjust volume for audio that automatically plays on a page for more than 3 seconds. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.3 Contrast, minimum, are 1.4.3.a Color contrast, regular text. Regular text and images of regular text must have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5:1 with the background. 1.4.3.b Color contrast, large text. Large text and images of large text, at or over 18-point or 14-point bold, must have a contrast ratio of at least 3:1 with the background. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.4 Resize text are 1.4.4.a Resize, 200%. The page must be readable and functional when browser zoom is set to 200% of its initial size. The requirements for success criterion SC 1.4.5 Images of text are 1.4.5.a Images of text. If the same visual presentation can be made using text alone, an image must not be used to present that text. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.6 Contrast, enhanced, are 1.4.6.a Contrast, enhanced. The visual presentation of text and images of text has a contrast ratio of at least 7:1. 1.4.6.b Contrast, logotypes. Text that is part of a logo or brand name has no minimum contrast requirement. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.7 Low or no background audio are 1.4.7.a, low or no background audio, perceivable. For pre-recorded audio-only content that contains primarily speech in the foreground, is not an audio captcha or audio logo, and is not vocalization intended to be primarily musical expression such as singing or rapping. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.8 Visual presentation are 1.4.8.a Visual presentation. Low vision users by letting them see text without distracting presentational features. It lets them configure text in ways that will be easier for them to see by letting them control the color and size of blocks of text. The requirements for success criterion 1.4.9 Images of text, no exception, are 1.4.9.a Images of text, no exception. Images of text are only used for pure decoration or where a particular presentation of text is essential to the information being conveyed. The requirements for success criterion January 4, 10 reflow are 1.4.10.a reflow. The content must be viewable without scrolling horizontally when the viewport is set to 320 CSS pixels wide. The requirements for success criterion January 4, 11 non-text contrast are 1.4.11.a, non-text contrast, active user interface components. Any visual boundary that indicates an active user component's hit area, the region where a pointer can activate the control, must have sufficient contrast of 3:1 with the adjacent background. Exceptions exist. 1.4.11.b, non-text contrast, states of user interface components. The visual state of an active user interface component must have sufficient contrast of 3:1 with the adjacent background. Exceptions exist. 1.4.11.c, non-text contrast, graphical objects. Parts of graphics, required to understand the content, have a contrast ratio of 3:1 against adjacent color, s. Exceptions exist. The requirements for success criterion January 4, 12 text spacing are 1.4.12.a, text spacing. The spacing between letters, words, lines of text and paragraphs can be adjusted. The requirements for success criterion January 4, 13 content on hover or focus are 1.4.13.a, content on hover or focus. When additional content is triggered on pointer hover or on keyboard focus, that additional content can be perceived. In addition, the additional content must be dismissible. The requirements for success criterion 2.1.1 keyboard are 2.1.1.a keyboard navigation. Page functionalities must be available using the keyboard, unless the functionality cannot be accomplished in any known way using a keyboard. 2.1.1.b shortcut keys. Page-specified shortcut keys and access keys must not conflict with existing browser and screen reader shortcuts. 2.1.1.c custom gestures. All functionalities based on custom gestures must also be available when a screen reader is turned on. The requirements for success criterion 2.1.2 no keyboard trap are 2.1.2.a keyboard trap. Keyboard focus must not be locked or trapped in a particular page element, and the user must be able to navigate to and from all navigable page elements using only a keyboard. The requirements for success criterion 2.1.3 keyboard, no exception, are 2.1.3.a keyword, no exception. All functionality of the content is operable through a keyboard interface without requiring specific timings for individual keystrokes. The requirements for success criterion 2.1.4 character key shortcuts are 2.1.4.a, character key shortcuts. If a single character key shortcut exists, then at least one of the following is true: single character key shortcuts can be turned off, remapped, or are only active when the relevant user interface component is in focus. The requirements for success criterion 2.2.1 timing adjustable are 2.2.1.a timing adjustable. If a page or application has a time limit, the user must be given options to turn off, adjust, or extend that time limit. The requirements for success criterion SC 2.2.2 pause, stop, hide are 2.2.2.a pause, stop, or hide content. Automatically moving, blinking, or scrolling content that lasts longer than 5 seconds must be able to be paused, stopped, or hidden by the user. 2.2.2.b automatically updating content. Automatically updating content must be able to be paused, stopped, or hidden by the user, or the user can manually control the timing of the updates. The requirements for success criterion 2.2.3 no timing are 2.2.3.a no timing. Timing is not an essential part of the event or activity presented by the content, except for non-interactive synchronized media and real-time events. The requirements for success criterion 2.2.4 interruptions are 2.2.4.a Interruptions. Interruptions can be postponed or suppressed by the user, except interruptions involving an emergency. The requirements for success criterion 2.2.5 Re-authenticating are 2.2.5.a Re-authenticating. When an authenticated session expires, the user can continue the activity without loss of data after re-authenticating. The requirements for success criterion 2.2.6 Timeouts are 2.2.6.a Timeouts. Users are warned of the duration of any user inactivity that could cause data loss, unless the data is preserved for more than 20 hours when the user does not take any actions. The requirements for success criterion SC 2.3.13 Flashes or below threshold are 2.3.1.a Flashing content. A page must not contain content that flashes more than 3 times per second unless that flashing content is sufficiently small, and the flashes are of low contrast and do not exceed general flash thresholds. The requirements for success criterion 2.3.23 Flashes are 2.3.2.a 3 Flashes. Web pages do not contain anything that flashes more than 3 times in any 1 second period. The requirements for success criterion 2.3.3 Animation from interactions are 2.3.3.a Animation from interaction. Motion animation triggered by interaction can be disabled, unless the animation is essential to the functionality or the information being conveyed. The requirements for success criterion SC 2.4.1 Bypass blocks are 2.4.1.a Skip navigation, headings, or landmarks. A method must be provided to skip navigation and other page elements that are repeated across web pages. If a page has a proper heading structure and / or ARIA landmarks, this is a sufficient technique instead of a skip to main content link. 2.4.1.b Titles on frames. Frames must have descriptive, informative, and unique titles. The requirements for success criterion SC 2.4.2 Page titled are 2.4.2.a Titles on pages. Pages must have descriptive and informative page titles. The requirements for success criterion 2.4.3 Focus order are 2.4.3.a Focus order. The navigation order of links, form elements, etc. must be logical and intuitive. The requirements for success criterion 2.4.4 Link purpose, in context, are 2.4.4.a Link purpose, in context. The purpose of each link must be able to be determined from the link text alone, or from the link text and the context. Context equals same sentence, paragraph, list item, or table cell as the link, or in the table header cell for a link in a data table or ARIA techniques to associate additional text on the page with the link. The requirements for success criterion 2.4.5 Multiple ways are 2.4.5.a Multiple ways. Multiple ways must be available to find other web pages on the site, at least 2 of, a list of related pages, table of contents, sitemap, site search, or list of all available web pages. The requirements for success criterion 2.4.6 Headings and labels are 2.4.6.a Descriptive headings. Page headings must be informative. 2.4.6.b Descriptive labels. Labels for form and interactive controls must be informative. The requirements for success criterion 2.4.7 Focus visible are 2.4.7.a Focus visible. It must be visually apparent which page element has the current keyboard focus, i.e., as you tab through the page, you can see where you are. The requirements for success criterion 2.4.8 Location are 2.4.8.a Location. Information about the user's location within a set of web pages is available. The requirements for success criterion 2.4.9 link purpose, link only, are 2.4.9.a link purpose, link only. A mechanism is available to allow the purpose of each link to be identified from link text alone, except where the purpose of the link would be ambiguous to users in general. The requirements for success criterion February 4, 10 section headings are 2.4.10.a section headings. Section headings are used to organize the content. The requirements for success criterion 2.5.1 pointer gestures are 2.5.1.a pointer gestures. All functionality that can be operated with a pointer can be operated with single point actions. Path-based or multi-point gestures are not required to operate any functionality. Exceptions exist. The requirements for success criterion 2.5.2 pointer cancellation are 2.5.2.a pointer cancellation. For functionality that can be operated using a single pointer, at least one of the following is true: no down event, abort/undo, up reversal or essential. The requirements for success criterion 2.5.3 label and name are 2.5.3.a label and name. For each user interface component that includes a visible text label, make sure the accessible name matches, or includes, the visible text in the label. The requirements for success criterion 2.5.4 motion actuation are 2.5.4.a motion actuation. Ensure that for functionality that can be triggered by a device motion, like shaking, tilting, or b user gestures detected by device sensors, including a camera, that both of the following are true: 1. Motion actuation can be disabled, and 2. The functionality can be operated without using device motion or user gestures. Exceptions exist. The requirements for success criterion 2.5.5 touch target are 2.5.5.a touch target size. The touch target size of actionable elements should be at least 44 pixels by 44 pixels with at least 6 pixels of inactive space between any adjacent actionable elements. The requirements for success criterion 2.5.6 concurrent input mechanisms are 2.5.6.a concurrent input mechanisms. Web content does not restrict use of input modalities available on a platform except where the restriction is essential, required to ensure the security of the content, or required to respect user settings. The requirements for success criterion 3.1.1 language of page are 3.1.1.a default page language. The language of the page must be identified using the HTML lang attribute. The requirements for success criterion SC 3.1.2 language of parts are 3.1.2.a language of parts. The language of sections of content that are different from the page's default language must be identified, using the HTML lang attribute. The requirements for success criterion 3.1.3 unusual words are 3.1.3.a unusual words. A mechanism is available for identifying specific definitions of words or phrases used in an unusual or restricted way, including idioms and jargon. The requirements for success criterion 3.1.4 abbreviations are 3.1.4.a abbreviations, expanded form. The expanded form of each abbreviation is available in a programmatically determinable manner. User agents that speak the text can use the expanded form to announce the abbreviation. Other user agents might make the expanded form available as a tooltip or as contextual help for the abbreviation. The requirements for success criterion 3.1.5 reading level are 3.1.5.A Reading Level. When text requires reading ability more advanced than the lower secondary education level after removal of proper names and titles, supplemental content, or a version that does not require reading ability more advanced than the lower secondary education level, is available. The requirements for success criterion 3.1.6 pronunciation are 3.1.6.A Pronunciation. A mechanism is available for identifying specific pronunciation of words where meaning of the words, in context, is ambiguous without knowing the pronunciation. The requirements for success criterion 3.2.1 on focus are 3.2.1.A Context changes, on focus. When a page element receives focus, it must not result in a substantial change to the page, the spawning of a pop-up window, an additional change of keyboard focus, or any other change that could confuse or disorient the user. The requirements for success criterion 3.2.2 on input are 3.2.2.A Context changes, on input. When a user inputs information or interacts with a control, it must not result in a substantial change to the page, the spawning of a pop-up window, an additional change of keyboard focus, or any other change that could confuse or disorient the user unless the user is informed of the change ahead of time. The requirements for success criterion 3.2.3 consistent navigation are 3.2.3.A Consistent navigation patterns. Navigation patterns that are repeated on web pages must be presented in the same relative order each time they appear and must not change order when navigating through the site. The requirements for success criterion 3.2.4 Consistent identification are 3.2.4.A Consistent identification. Elements such as labels, names, and text alternatives for content that have the same functionality across multiple web pages must be consistently identified. The requirements for success criterion 3.2.5 Change on request are 3.2.5.A Change on request. Changes of context are initiated only by user request or a mechanism is available to turn off such changes. The requirements for success criterion 3.3.1 Error identification are 3.3.1.A Keyboard trap. Keyboard focus must not be locked or trapped in a particular page element and the user must be able to navigate to and from all navigable page elements using only a keyboard. The requirements for success criterion 3.3.2 Labels or instructions are 3.3.2.A Visible labels. Sufficient labels for form field elements must be provided for all users, cited and non-cited. 3.3.2.B Missing instructions. Sufficient instructions for form field elements must be provided. 3.3.2.C Required form fields. Labels, instructions, or error messages must be provided when form fields require user input. The requirements for success criterion 3.3.3 Error suggestion are 3.3.3.A Error suggestion. If input errors are automatically detected, suggestions must be provided in text for fixing the input in a timely and accessible manner before the data is submitted to the server. The requirements for success criterion 3.3.4 Error prevention, legal, financial, data, are 3.3.4.A Error prevention, legal, financial, data. If the user can change or delete legal, financial, student exam responses, or unrecoverable/unintentionally modified or deleted data, the changes/deletions must be reversible, verified, or confirmed. The requirements for success criterion 3.3.5 Help are 3.3.5.A Help. Context-sensitive help only needs to be provided when the label is not sufficient to describe all functionality. The existence of context-sensitive help should be obvious to the user and they should be able to obtain it whenever they require it. The requirements for success criterion 3.3.6 error prevention, all, are 3.3.6.a error prevention, all. For web pages that require the user to submit information, one of the following is true. Reversible submissions are reversible. The requirements for success criterion 4.1.1 parsing are 4.1.1.a complete start and end tags. Elements must have complete start and end tags. 4.1.1.b nested according to specification. Elements must be nested according to their specifications. 4.1.1.c duplicate attributes. Elements must not contain duplicate attributes. 4.1.1.d unique IDs. Element IDs must be unique. The requirements for success criterion 4.1.2 name, role, value are 4.1.2.a name, role, value. The name, role, and value of page components must be programmatically determinable by assistive technologies. 4.1.2.b custom controls. HTML markup must meet W3C specifications and facilitate accessibility support with assistive technologies. 4.1.2.c compatibility. Document features and components must be compatible with assistive technologies. The requirements for success criterion 4.1.3 status messages are 4.1.3.a status messages. Ensure that status messages can be programmatically determined through role or properties such that they can be presented to the user by assistive technologies without receiving focus. Accessibility testing for WCAG conformance takes time. Integrating accessibility testing into every phase of the software development life cycle is key to using resources wisely. Formal accessibility reviews conducted by experts should be part of each of the following phases. Requirements: design, development, testing, launch, maintenance. Developing with accessibility in mind is the first win. Knowing that the software must work in the following situations. No sight, works with a screen reader. No sound, works without hearing. No speech, works without speech as the only input. No mouse, works with keyboard alone. So with this, we have come to the end of this video. We hope you guys find it informative and helpful. Thanks for watching.